I spent 28 years being my family's rock, always the one they called when life got messy. I fixed their problems, paid their bills, and held everyone together through every crisis. But after one explosive family meeting where they blamed me for destroying their lives, I did something I had never done before. I walked away. 48 hours later, my phone started ringing nonstop with desperate voicemails I never expected to hear. Before I tell you how my family went from calling me their biggest mistake to literally begging on my voicemail, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe because this story has a twist that even I did not see coming. My name is Lucinda, and at 28 years old, I thought I had my life figured out. I worked as a marketing coordinator in Portland, Oregon, living in a small apartment that I actually loved, despite my family constantly suggesting I should move back home to help out more. See, I am the eldest of four siblings in what you might generously call a chaotic household. My father, David, was a dreamer in the worst possible way. Every few months, he would announce some new business venture that was going to make us rich. There was the food truck phase, the online dropshipping experiment, the cryptocurrency mining setup in our garage, and about dozen other schemes that burned through money faster than he could borrow it. My mother, Patricia, seemed permanently overwhelmed by life drifting through each day like she was waiting for someone else to take control. Then there were my siblings. Jake, 26 years old and chronically unemployed, had been living at home since high school graduation. He had this talent for finding excuses why every job was beneath him or why every opportunity just was not quite right. My sister Amanda, 23, had dropped out of college after 2 years, but somehow maintained an impressive shopping addiction that kept her credit cards maxed out. And Tyler, the baby at 19, was technically in community college, but treated his education like an expensive hobby someone else should pay for. Somewhere along the way, I had become the family's unofficial manager. It started when I was 16 and noticed the electricity was about to get shut off because nobody had paid the bill. I used money from my part-time job to keep the lights on, and somehow that became my responsibility forever. By my early 20s, I was handling family finances, covering rent, when Dad's latest venture failed, and organizing every holiday gathering, because Mom said it was too stressful. I paid Amanda's car payments when she could not manage her budget. I bought Tyler's textbooks every semester and covered his gas money. When Jake needed clothes for job interviews, he never followed through on guess who went shopping with him. When Mom and Dad fought about money, they both called me to mediate. When someone needed to remember birthdays, coordinate family dinners, or handle any crisis that required actual adult responsibility, everyone looked to Lucinda. The exhaustion was bone deep. I had missed career opportunities because I was handling family emergencies. I had canceled dates and lost friendships because someone always needed me to fix something. My parents treated me more like a co-parent than their daughter, and my siblings saw me as a combination ATM and personal assistant. But everything changed when my grandmother Eleanor died last spring. Grandmother Eleanor had always been different from the rest of the family. She was sharp, independent, and had built a successful life through her own hard work. While the rest of my family saw her as old-fashioned and distant, she and I had maintained a close relationship through weekly phone calls and monthly visits. When the lawyer read her will, the room went completely silent. Grandmother Eleanor had left her entire inheritance specifically to me, $350,000 in savings and investments, plus her beautiful house in Salem that was worth at least another $200,000. The will stated very clearly, "To my granddaughter Lucinda, who has shown more responsibility and maturity than the rest of the family combined." My family's reaction was immediate and predictable. Dad saw an opportunity to fund his latest business scheme. Mom started crying about family unity and what grandmother really would have wanted. Jake automatically assumed he could move into grandmother's house rent-free, maybe finally get some independence while still avoiding actual responsibility. Amanda had already mentally spent her portion of the money on a new car and wardrobe. Tyler acted like the inheritance was somehow owed to him for being the youngest and neediest. But for the first time in my adult life, I realized I had a choice. This money represented freedom from years of enabling everyone else's poor decisions. This house represented a fresh start, somewhere I could build my own life without constant family drama. Grandmother Eleanor had specifically chosen me because she recognized what I had sacrificed for this family. The daily phone calls started immediately. Mom would call crying about fairness and family values. Dad would launch into detailed presentations about investment opportunities that just needed a little startup capital. Jake would guilt trip me about how hard it was living at home and how much he deserved a chance at independence. Amanda would create elaborate budgets showing how she planned to use her portion of the money responsibly. Tyler would remind me how expensive college was and how much I had already invested in his education. Family meetings became intervention sessions, where everyone took turns explaining why I needed to do the right thing and share equally. The emotional manipulation was relentless. They brought up every favor they had ever done for me, every childhood memory that proved we were supposed to stick together, every reason why grandmother's decision was unfair to the rest of them. For weeks, I tried to explain that grandmother's wishes should be respected. I reminded them that she had spent years watching our family dynamics and had made a deliberate choice. But logic did not matter when they could smell $350,000. The pressure was suffocating. Every conversation became about the inheritance. Every family interaction carried this underlying tension about what I was going to do with grandmother's money. I started avoiding phone calls and making excuses not to come to family dinners. The guilt was crushing, but for the first time I began questioning whether all those years of helping had actually been helping at all. The breaking point came when I was cleaning out my apartment and found a stack of thank you cards I had never opened. They were addressed to my parents, thanking them for the thoughtful wedding gifts, sympathy flowers, and birthday presents I had researched, purchased, and sent on their behalf. Cards thanking them for organizing family reunions, charity fundraisers, and community events that I had planned and executed while they took credit. I sat on my living room floor surrounded by evidence of how invisible my contributions had been. Then I found the shoebox where I kept receipts for family expenses, and the numbers made me sick. Over the past 3 years alone, I had spent more than $40,000 on everyone else. Car repairs for Jake, credit card payments for Amanda Tyler's tuition, and books emergency rent when Dad's businesses failed, and dozens of smaller expenses that seemed reasonable in the moment but added up to a second mortgage I was not building equity on. I thought about the promotions I had turned down because they required travel and someone needed to be available for family emergencies. I remembered the relationship that ended because my boyfriend got tired of our dates being interrupted by crisis phone calls. I counted the friendships that had faded because I was always canceling plans to handle someone else's problem. That night, I made a decision that terrified me. I was going to honor grandmother's wishes and keep the inheritance. I was going to use this money to build my own life instead of funding everyone else's mistakes. I was going to move to Salem and start over somewhere I could be Lucinda the individual instead of Lucinda the family caretaker. I called a family meeting for the following Sunday. I spent the entire week rehearsing what I was going to say, knowing this conversation would change everything. When I arrived at my parents' house, I could tell they had prepared their own strategy. Dad had printed out business plans and financial projections. Mom had prepared a speech about family loyalty. My siblings had coordinated their approach like they were launching a military campaign. Jake started by presenting his plan to move into grandmother's house and fix it up in exchange for free rent. Amanda explained how she was going to use her portion of the money to go back to school and finally get serious about her future. Tyler had calculated exactly how much he needed to finish college without student loans. Dad launched into his most polished pitch yet about an investment opportunity that would multiply grandmother's money and benefit the entire family. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When they finished, the room was quiet except for the sound of Mom sniffling into tissues she had strategically placed around the room. Then I stood up and began talking. I told them about the thank you cards and the receipts. I listed every sacrifice I had made over the past 12 years. I itemized the financial support I had provided to each family member. I explained how they had taken my generosity for granted and never once asked what I needed or wanted for my own life. I told them I was keeping the inheritance exactly as grandmother intended. I announced that I was moving to Salem and taking a step back from being the family's caretaker. I explained that from now on, each person would need to handle their own finances, problems, and responsibilities. The explosion was immediate and ugly. Dad started shouting about how I was destroying the family and being incredibly selfish. Mom sobbed dramatically about losing a daughter and how grandmother would be ashamed of my behavior. Jake called me ungrateful and accused me of thinking I was better than everyone else. Amanda screamed that I had ruined all their lives and stolen their futures. Tyler said he never wanted to see me again, and that I was the worst sister in the world. My parents declared that if I did not reconsider, I was dead to them. They said they had raised me better than this and could not believe they had created such a heartless person. The shouting got so intense that neighbors probably heard every word, but something strange happened as they screamed at me. Instead of the usual guilt and anxiety, I felt calm. I had spent 28 years absorbing their emotions and fixing their problems, and now I realized I did not have to anymore. I was not responsible for their feelings or their futures. I calmly walked to the hallway closet and packed up the few photos and mementos I had brought over the years. While they continued shouting, I loaded everything into my car and drove home. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in years, my mind was completely clear. I turned off my phone for 24 hours and experienced something I had never felt before: complete peace. No emergency calls, no guilt trips, no one needing me to solve their problems. I slept 10 hours straight and woke up feeling like a different person. The next day, I drove to Salem to visit grandmother's house alone for the first time since her funeral. Walking through her rooms, I felt her presence in every carefully chosen piece of furniture and every book on her shelves. In her bedroom, I found an envelope with my name on it tucked inside her jewelry box. Inside were letters she had written to me over the years, but never sent. Letter after letter describing what she had observed about my family's treatment of me. She had noticed how they called me only when they needed something. She had watched me sacrifice my own dreams to fund their mistakes. She had seen how exhausted I looked at every family gathering, how I spent holidays managing everyone else's emotions instead of enjoying myself. The final letter was dated just 2 weeks before she died. My dearest Lucinda, by the time you read this, you will have a choice to make. You can continue being everyone else's solution, or you can finally live your own life. You deserve this freedom, sweetheart. Do not let them steal it from you. Use this gift to become the woman you were meant to be instead of the woman they needed you to be. I sat in her kitchen and cried for an hour, not from sadness, but from relief. Someone had finally seen me for who I really was, instead of what I could provide. Meanwhile, my family was discovering exactly how much I had been handling behind the scenes. The first day without me, Jake showed up at my apartment building, expecting our usual Friday dinner that I hosted every week. When security would not let him up, he called my phone repeatedly until he realized I was not answering. Patricia called my workplace pretending to be concerned about my well-being, trying to get my supervisor to force me to return her calls. She discovered that I had been managing all the family's insurance claims and bill organization through online systems they did not even know existed. By the second day, Amanda's credit card company called my parents about late payments. Apparently, I had been quietly managing her minimum payments for months to keep her credit from completely tanking. Tyler discovered that his car insurance had been paid automatically from my account for the past 8 months. The third day brought a crisis Dad was not prepared for. His business partner called looking for me because I had been the one organizing their meetings, handling their paperwork, and managing their communications. When Dad tried to handle it himself, he realized he did not even know the password to the email account I had set up for the business. The electric company threatened to shut off power for a late payment that I typically handled through automatic online payments they did not know existed. The lawn service, house cleaning, and grocery delivery services all sent cancellation notices because the credit card on file belonged to me. Jake showed up at my apartment building multiple times, but I had asked security not to let any family members up without my permission. Amanda created a fake emergency about a car accident, hoping I would rush to help, but when I did not respond to her texts, she had to handle it herself for the first time in years. Tyler sent increasingly desperate messages explaining how much he needed me, and promising he would change if I would just answer my phone. David's latest business deal fell through completely because he could not access the contact lists and financial information I had organized for him. My parents discovered they owed money to multiple people I had been quietly handling payments for. Their marriage started straining under financial pressures they had no idea how to manage because I had been their invisible safety net for so long. That was when the begging started. The voicemails shifted from angry demands to desperate pleading. Mom left a tearful message admitting they had made a mistake and asking me to please call back so they could apologize properly. Jake promised he would get a real job and start acting like an adult if I would just give him another chance. Amanda offered to split the inheritance fairly, still trying to manipulate, but with much less confidence. Tyler showed up at my workplace with flowers and a handwritten apology, explaining to my coworkers how sorry he was and how much he needed his sister back in his life. Dad sent a formal letter requesting a family meeting so they could all apologize and work things out like adults. Everyone suddenly claimed they had always supported my decision about the inheritance and just wanted to make sure I was okay. The same people who had called me selfish and heartless were now describing me as the most important person in their lives. For the first time in my adult life, I held all the power in my family relationships, and I realized how intoxicating that felt after years of being taken for granted. After 2 weeks of ignored calls and messages, I agreed to meet with them one final time. But this meeting would happen on my terms at a neutral location with clear boundaries about what I was and was not willing to discuss. I chose a quiet restaurant in downtown Portland and arrived with a prepared statement and a list of non-negotiable boundaries. When my family walked in, they looked genuinely shocked at my confidence and composure. I was not the exhausted, overwhelmed woman they were used to manipulating. I started by announcing that I was keeping grandmother's inheritance and moving to her house in Salem within the month. I explained that I would maintain contact with all of them, but I was permanently retiring from my role as the family caretaker. Each person would need to handle their own finances problems and responsibilities from now on. There would be no more emergency calls, guilt trips, or manipulation tactics. I told them that our relationships moving forward would be voluntary, not obligated. If they wanted me in their lives, they would need to treat me as an equal family member, not as their personal problem solver and financial backup plan. The initial reaction was shock and attempts at negotiation. Patricia tried her usual emotional manipulation, talking about how families are supposed to stick together and help each other. I calmly redirected the conversation, explaining that help goes both ways, and I had never experienced that reciprocal support. Dad proposed a compromise where I would keep most of the inheritance but invest a small portion in his business, guaranteeing everyone would benefit from the growth. I refused without explanation, simply stating that grandmother's wishes were final. Jake and Tyler tried their puppy dog expressions and promises to change the same tactics that had worked for years. But I was immune to their manipulation now. I had seen how quickly they could learn to handle things themselves when they had no other choice. Amanda was the first to break down and admit the truth. She confessed that they had all taken advantage of my kindness and generosity. She acknowledged that they had treated me like their personal bank and assistant instead of their sister and daughter. Her honesty was surprising and genuine. One by one, the others grudgingly accepted my new boundaries. They realized I was completely serious and that no amount of crying guilt tripping or manipulation was going to change my mind. For the first time in family memory, they agreed to terms they had no control over. I moved to grandmother's house in Salem the following month. Using part of the inheritance, I renovated her beautiful old home, keeping her vintage charm, but adding modern conveniences that made it truly mine. I started a freelance marketing business from her home office, taking on clients who valued quality work and paid appropriately for my expertise. The isolation I had feared turned out to be healing. I joined a community garden club and made my first genuine friendships in years with people who knew nothing about my family history. I began seeing a therapist who helped me understand the codependent patterns I had developed and why enabling others had felt like love for so long. I started dating casually for the first time without family interference. I discovered hobbies and interests I never had time for when I was constantly managing other people's crises. I learned what authentic joy felt like when it was not overshadowed by someone else's emergency. 6 months later, my family had slowly adapted to their new independence. Jake found a part-time job at a hardware store and moved in with 2 roommates who did not enable his laziness. The responsibility was good for him, and he started taking pride in earning his own money. Amanda learned to budget and manage her credit cards. She even asked me for advice occasionally, but she approached me respectfully instead of demanding I fix her problems. She was actually considering going back to school, but this time with a realistic plan and her own funding. Tyler took out proper student loans and suddenly began appreciating his education when he realized how much it actually cost. He switched to a practical major and started getting better grades when he understood the real value of his tuition money. My parents' marriage improved dramatically when they stopped enabling their adult children and started focusing on their own relationship. Dad got a steady job instead of chasing get-rich-quick schemes, and Mom started volunteering with local charities, finding purpose outside of managing family drama. Family gatherings became voluntary and much more genuine. When we did spend time together, we actually talked about each other's lives instead of just discussing who needed what kind of help. The relationships were healthier because they were based on choice rather than obligation. The most important lesson I learned was that enabling others does not help them grow. By always rescuing my family from the consequences of their poor decisions, I had prevented them from developing the skills they needed to be successful adults. My kindness had actually been a form of harm disguised as love. I realized that saying no to others means saying yes to yourself. For years, I had measured my worth by how useful I was to other people, but real love does not require the sacrifice of yourself. Setting boundaries was not selfish. It was necessary for healthy relationships. I learned that family guilt can disguise manipulation, and that being related to someone does not give them the right to exploit your generosity. Love should enhance your life, not drain it. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is letting them solve their own problems. When you stop rescuing people from their mistakes, they finally learn how to avoid making them. When you stop funding their poor decisions, they start making better choices. When you stop absorbing their emotions, they learn how to manage their own feelings. If you are reading this and recognizing yourself as the family caretaker, I want you to know that it is okay to put yourself first. It is okay to say no when people ask for things you cannot afford to give. It is okay to step back from relationships that drain your energy without giving anything back. Your worth is not determined by how much you sacrifice for others. You deserve love that does not come with conditions or expectations. You deserve relationships that fill your cup instead of constantly emptying it. Grandmother Eleanor gave me more than money and a house. She gave me permission to value myself the way I had always valued everyone else. She showed me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let people stand on their own. Have you ever been the family caretaker who gave and gave until you had nothing left? Or maybe you have seen someone else trapped in that cycle of endless sacrifice. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding your strength when others try to take it away. Share this with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not measured by their usefulness to others. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the chance to grow up and solve their own problems.